So we've just been looking at the book of Ruth, and this amazing thing about this loyalty that Ruth has towards her mother-in-law Naomi. So they've come back to the town of Bethlehem. They've come from Moab, where Ruth was born, but Naomi had gone there as a refugee and lost her husband and lost the two sons. So Naomi chooses to go back with her mother-in-law, having lost her own husband, and with little chance of really a future, so it appears. Anyway, in Ruth chapter 2 says this: Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side from the clan of Elimelech, a man of standing whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favour. So this habit of picking up the leftover grain was within the law of Moses. You could actually go as a poor person and just glean, so going to the edge of the fields. Under the Mosaic laws, landowners were told to leave some leftovers just on the edge so that the poor could come and just take pickings, leftovers of grain, and then obviously use that for their own needs. But it was hard work, it was difficult, and I suspect a lot of people weren't very fair and maybe didn't bother that much, weren't too interested to care about the poor. And so you have this very interesting thing, and we're introduced to this name Boaz of this wider relative that comes from Naomi's family. And Ruth decides, as a very poor person, an alien, an outsider, no sort of visible means of support, to go and see if she could go gleaning, so she could try and get some income together, just to start something to try and meet their very basic needs. Otherwise they would be absolutely destitute. So she begins this journey, and with a hope that someone might be favourable, so that she might be safe to go and glean in someone's field. And so Naomi said to her, Go ahead, my daughter. So she went out and began to glean in the fields behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she found herself working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. And then in verse 4, chapter 2, verse 4, it says, Just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. The Lord be with you. And the Lord bless you, they called back. So it's an amazing moment when Ruth happens to be in the right place at the right time. And the story begins to unfold of how Boaz is the landowner in this case. And Ruth ends up in the place where he owns the land, and she just comes in. The harvesters would go forward and do all the reaping of the harvest, and the poor and the outsiders would probably just manage to get bits and pieces that are leftovers. But his greeting it says it all, really, isn't it? He greets the harvesters and says, "The Lord be with you," and they call back, "The Lord bless you." And there's a blessing that starts to come into this story. Everything up to now, especially the tragic story of the lives of Naomi and Ruth, doesn't look like blessing, does it? It doesn't look like favour. It doesn't look like there's hope of favour. And yet Ruth carries this in her heart. Let's see if there's some favour somewhere. Let's see if there's opportunity. Let's see if there's hope. Something in her is just alive to that possibility. So I pray that whoever's listening to this, that glimmer, that hope of what may be, not because of anything that we could perhaps imagine in our own minds, but because of God's grace, that hope will take light in you. That little spark of hope will begin to be fanned into a flame of being in the place of God's favour, being in the place of God's blessing for you.